Is that better? Sorry. Okay. So when you first think of affordable housing, what is it you normally think about? Do you think about programs? Do you think about buildings? Do you think about the people that are in it? What is it that you think about when you hear that term affordable housing? Buildings. Yep. And it's interesting because affordable housing, a lot of times people will, let's see if I can go ahead. A lot of times people do think of buildings, but they think of these images of the old public housing. The ones that I think of when I look at this, I think of Army barracks when I look at that middle one, which is what public housing was. It's government funded housing. And I just, as Judy was saying, I just was in Tennessee. And so I'm driving around looking at these historical buildings, and many of them were turned into, they were historical military buildings that were turned into what we called public housing. Now we call this affordable housing. And any type of housing, any housing structure can be affordable housing, because ultimately affordable housing is more about the funding than the structure itself. So affordable housing, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, is when an occupant is paying only 30% of his, her, or their gross monthly or gross income for housing. And you can see here, I've got a list of what housing costs mean, because it's not just rent, it's not just mortgage, it's also your property taxes, your insurance, whether you're a renter or a homeowner insurance, HOA fees, your water, your utilities, and including trash. So if you calculate in your head, how much am I paying every month towards that? Is that 30% of my monthly income? If it isn't, you're considered housing cost burdened. And that's the part that HUD does not like. They don't want people in a situation where they feel like they're spending more than 30%, because the idea behind 30% is that you still have other costs to deal with. We all have to deal with transportation. Some of us have to deal with childcare. We have to deal with healthcare. We have to pay for food. So beyond that, the idea is to make sure that you're not so burdened by your housing costs that you cannot afford the other necessities in life. So each year, HUD sends us this income table, is what I'd rather call it. Then they call it income limit summary, but it's an income table, because where they get concerned, you can see in here, this median family income. This is for us. This includes the Adams County area. This is the median family income for this particular year. That means a 4-person family making this amount probably can live off of that. But when you are under, and this is considered 100% of the area median income, when you're under that amount, 80, 50% less, that's when there is some concern. And HUD looks at this from the number of people, and it says persons and family, but they're really saying the number of people in the household. So the number of people living there, all of that income combined, if it meets in one of these categories, if you're above that, that's great. If you're not, so if you're a person who is, and you can see this, a 4-person family, and you're making a combined total income of $94,650, you're at the upper limits of where they start to say you're qualified for affordable housing, which basically means you're qualified for some subsidies to help you with your housing costs. So let me show you an example. So here's an example of this. If somebody was, again, using this year's numbers, if somebody's coming in here, if there's a single person, an individual living in a home, and they're spending 30% of their monthly income on housing, that's $1,658. The current average rent for this area, for Westminster, where we're sitting right now, is $1,900. So without even paying utilities, without paying any of the insurance on that, a renter is already well spending well over 30%. Even when you get down here, 50%, 2,763. That's probably more of what somebody's paying here. And when we say the average is 1,800 in Brighton or 1,900 a month in rent, when we say that, we're talking about that's everything together averaged, but generally speaking, if you want decent housing, you're probably going to be spending more, because ultimately we all know it's about location. Your price of your house, your price of your apartment is always based on the location, how close it is to schools, how much crime there is in an area. All of those elements go into this. The same thing can be looked at, like I said, if you're an owner. So if you're an owner and you're spending $2,000 a month, and yet your income as an individual is this much, you get into that level of, I'm needing some sort of assistance. And that can be a program as well as a building. And I say that because I have a friend who's 81 years old, and she is raising her granddaughter, her 7-year-old granddaughter, and she owns her home. And she has said, this is the only thing I have because all my pension is gone. She was a school teacher. And so she's in this category. She would be considered, even though it says couple, but she would be considered as a 2-person household. She does not even make that. She's not even bringing in 1,894 a month, because she's trying to live off of Social Security. So what we started looking at is programs for her. And that was the first step, because she doesn't want to give up her home. So one of the things we do when we are in Adams County as a whole is we look at that. We look at how many people have a certain income level, and then how much housing is available for people within those income levels. So you can see this. We will check the balance of housing. What's the gap? So this has got income ranges everywhere from 0 to 9,999. And then you get way down here to 150,000 a year or more. So all of these income levels, and this is a bit blurry, I apologize, but the idea behind this is these are income levels. This is the maximum allowable rent you can afford at these income levels. And then we look at how many renter housing options are there. And then we look at how many owner occupied housing options there are. And we calculate across, and we end up finding out where our gap is. And you can see there's a lot of negatives here, because what typically happens is there is not enough housing for people based on your income level. There's not enough in Adams County, which means we're always behind the 8 ball. We're always trying to build more, or we're trying to make sure there's programs. So one of the things I managed was the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which was the funding that came down from the U.S. Treasury, specifically for people who are that area median income of 80% or lower, who needed that during the pandemic to make sure that they could stay in their homes. Because ultimately, our goal is to make sure those people that are in here now can stay in their homes. And those people that need homes, that we are figuring out a program or some sort of project or housing that they can get into. Yes. Sure, there's different types of programs. So there's a couple things. One, if somebody was interested in buying a car, but they had purchased their entire house and they said, it's time, I got to get a car. You could actually do a reverse mortgage, and you could go through that. If you've got everything cared for, but you're worried about health or, paying expenses in general, then my recommendation would be to say, let's look at some of the other programs that you'd be covered for. So for example, you apply for LEAP, which is Low Income Energy Assistance Program, but you could actually get through that. Once you're in LEAP, you could actually get through a program where they'll take your monthly income, and they'll just say, well, you only have to pay a certain percentage of your utility bill each month based on that. So there's different programs that you can be a part of. And some of them are actually funded through the same grant programs that we administer at the county, because what it says in our grants from HUD is you're not only trying to help housing, you're also helping the associated costs with housing. So we get into developing programs to make sure people have a decent living environment. And that means you can live in a healthy way, pay for your utilities. Yep. Right. So one of the programs we fund is called a minor home repair program, and people can apply through that. You can have up to $24,000 worth of costs taken care of, as long as it isn't general maintenance. If you have to have your electric redone, that would be covered. If you have a problem with a furnace, a water heater, we get a lot of people that will have a plumbing issue, you can actually get that help through the minor home repair program. You could get an air conditioner, but there is some steps with having your doctor say it necessitates an air conditioner. So you're at a point where you need that. Yeah. And like I said, we have to tie it to a health safety issue. And an air conditioner would tie to a health issue of the people living there, not the house. Whereas like having faulty electrical ties to a health safety in the house. Okay, so what a great segue for what's our role in the county. So there's differences between a city and a county and what you can do. Counties are statutorily authorized to do certain things, but basically that means is whatever the rules are for the state, there's the same rules for many counties. Now the cities, many of them have become home rule, and once they become home rule, they can do things that non-home rule counties and cities cannot do. So for example, Adams County is non-home rule. That means Adams County, just like the state, cannot own land for housing. So we have to go through a housing authority for that. Now, at the city of Lafayette, where I'm a council member, that city is home rule. And so one of the things we did for affordable housing is we took money and we purchased land, and we did what was called land banking. We then went to an affordable housing developer and said, we want you to develop this, but we've already purchased the land, so you don't have to deal with that. So a little bit different on some of the roles that you can do and you can't do at the county. But we do have, and this is the benefit of both the state and the county, is we administer local and federal housing funds. So we get them directly from HUD or the Treasury. And when we get those funds, we can assign those out to programs and projects and municipalities. So as the municipalities may be purchasing, that's the interesting thing. As a city, you have the authority to purchase, but typically the city doesn't have the funds like a county or a state. So they really rely on applying for these grants and loans from the state and from the county to purchase those. So we all work together. I truly don't think that the city, the county, and the state could, work any other way than trying to work as a partnership in this. So you'll see another thing the Adams County government does is we oversee land use regulations. So when a developer comes in and says, I want to build housing, one of the things we could do when we go through the land use regulations is if our regulations say, okay, you can only come in here if 10% of your housing is affordable to people at a certain income level, that could force that developer to change how that development is. The other thing we can do is permit. We permit and zone. So we zone for residential versus commercial, and that makes a difference. And then we set policy. One of the programs we're working on right now and looking at in terms of a policy is trying to find out the amount of commercial that comes into Adams County. There's new employees when you bring in new commercial. So those people then are looking for housing. Well, if you go back to that slide, we don't have the housing for them, or they're going to be kicking out somebody else if they buy a house. That's that competition. So one of the policies we're looking at now is charging a fee to certain new commercial that would come in and bring so many people that need housing in Adams County. And that fee would go into purchasing land or putting something together for building housing, something that we could put together with the housing authority. Now, Adams County has 3 housing authorities that we could work with. We work with what's called Maker Housing Partners. That's really, they're doing business as Maker. Their title is the Housing Authority of Adams County. So they are essentially a government/private entity. They're kind of a public-private partnership entity. Brighton Housing Authority and Commerce City Housing Authority. So we work in partnership with them. We also have many nonprofits that work in housing or work with housing programs. There's some that have housing navigation, like Almost Home. There's some that have rent assistance. There's some like CRHDC, which is Community Resources and Housing Development Corporation, that have 2 parts. They actually offer finance for people who need to get into a home, and they also do renovation of single-family homes to prepare them so that people who are able to get that down payment assistance can get into that home. So there's a variety of nonprofits that we work with, and they serve low and moderate income. So those are, when you're dealing with affordable housing, it's really a broad topic of how do you get to the point of getting people housing and stable housing. So, strategies. You heard me say we do policy changes to reduce barriers to creating more affordable housing projects. That is a big deal to the state of Colorado right now. Much of the state funding is coming in, and they're putting that with an asterisk on it and saying, you need to make sure you do not have policies that are preventing the development of affordable housing. We also fund projects that prepare for future affordable housing. We fund projects that will help us partner, and by partnering, we leverage funds. We preserve existing affordable housing. We use our funds to repurpose or convert property for affordable housing. Again, we're still doing this through agencies. We're granting or loaning funds to them, and construction of new affordable housing. So let's go through some projects. So preparing for the future, one of the things we've done with the ARPA funds, which are the American Recovery Funds, those rescue funds allow us to land bank. And so we have worked with several. You can see up here, we're working with Brighton Housing Authority. They've purchased some property that is right next to a church, and they're preparing to get that designed so they can start. They have to be in the planning process by December of 2026, according to the ARPA funds. The same thing with our Habitat for Humanity project. This is in Bennett. They've actually got some land over here that they've purchased. And this one is specific. It's much more townhomes, row homes for people. And they're going to build housing there. So our funding has gone in to help both of those entities purchase the land. And that way they could deed restrict it and say, this will be affordable housing. Another thing that Adams County has been doing is land donations. So this is, and I have to say, this is not the greatest photograph. I was trying really hard to show what's going on here. If you know where the jail is, it's actually back behind here. Behind those trees, there is a parking lot and land, and that is donated. It used to be it included a building for the courts for Adams County, but it has now, we've taken all of that and donated it to the Brighton Housing Authority. There's enough land there that they could probably put 3 buildings with housing on it, and they'll do it over phases, several years in the works. That's a straight land donation. They can hold on to that and what we call land bank for as long as they need to. They can phase it so they can go get their funding to build 1 building and then come back each, years in the future. So when I say 60 to 160 units, they're thinking each building would have about 60 units in it. And it fronts Bridge Street. So it's on public transportation, which is great. It's down the block from grocery stores. So you have that nice setup there. This is one of our partnerships. You may have seen this. This is Clarion Hotel. If you're driving south down I-25 and you hit that I-70 interchange and you see this off to the right, it's a semicircle building. This has made the newspaper several times because Diane Daggett was the one that was very interested in getting a hotel that was purchased. This has been something that has really the strategy has increased a lot because of the pandemic. This idea that if you've got a hotel that's not fully occupied, maybe we need to purchase that. And you can see what's happening here. There's 215 units there. That's a lot of units for affordable housing. And all that needs to happen once you purchase is to renovate it to make sure that it has what's necessary for people there. This specifically would be for taking people who are currently unhoused and getting them into housing. The idea behind a transitional housing is to have people in for a certain amount of time, usually 3 months, maybe 6 months, while they start to get into all the processes that they need to find the next step of housing. Now, there will be people, and we always say there's a 30%, 30%. Anybody that's unhoused, of those people that are currently unhoused, 30% of them will never be able to pay for housing completely on their own, either because they have, and many times it's a disability that does it and keeps them from getting the jobs, a lot of jobs, or being able to work full time to get what they need, or because they've lost a lot of their income. Maybe they had gotten to a point where they are retired and they no longer, but they don't have a lot of income coming in and they've lost that, or for whatever reason, there's multiple problems. Another 30% are going to need about 2 years to go from unhoused to stable housing. And another 30% are going to be in and out in 3 to 6 months. So the idea behind this is to be realistic when you're looking. So when you see us say something like convert it to permanent and transitional housing, we're very realistic when we look at something like this, and we recognize that 30% of the people are not going to move out of there. The funding for this, you can see there's 10 million coming from the state, another 10 million coming from Denver, and then another 3.8 million coming from Adams County. Yes. Sure. Well, one of the things that we notice when it comes to homelessness is there's a lot of people living in their cars and RVs, and they're clever enough that they park right on the property line between Denver and Adams County. So they wait 10 days because Denver has said you got 10 days and you get over, and they roll themselves right on over to Adams County, and they're in Adams County for 10 days, and then they reverse and they go back. So what we've realized is by partnering together on something like that, what we're dealing with is people who are unhoused. They don't care where they live. They just want to make sure they've got some form of housing or shelter. We have another one of these we're working on. It's really in the concept phase. And this one is considered the Aurora Housing Regional Navigation Campus. It's a much bigger campus. The idea behind this one is that It is over by Anschutz Medical Campus, and the Aurora has I think an animal shelter in that area as well. And so they've got land and they're doing the same sort of thing. We're working with Denver. They've asked Adams County to put in some funds. The idea behind that is something very similar to this, but they only have raw land at this moment. So it's a matter of trying to figure out what's happening, what will work best. But their primary from that is a navigation center. The idea is that a lot of times I find people call me and say, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle it. And even though the state has a housing hotline that's worked through Brothers Redevelopment and there's people there answering the phones, there's still a lot of people that are confused once you get to that application for a project or not understand that if I apply for this program, how will that affect my eligibility for these other programs? So there's still a lot of need for individuals to figure out what works best for them. All right, preservation. So I was just counting, we have about 100 types and different, I would say more complexes of affordable housing in Adams County. And when I say that, it's not units. So units could be what you live in. So whether it's a single family home or it's an apartment or what we call an accessory dwelling unit, those would be considered units. But we have so much affordable housing out there and these complexes, after a while, they start to break down. And you have to have, even if you try to do general maintenance, you still have to go in and you have to do large repairs. This is a good example. Overlook at Thornton, it was built in 1973, and they've been doing a lot of smaller repairs. They've been doing painting and that kind of thing, upgraded windows. For those of you, this is Thornton, this is I-25 in here. This is the City of Thornton building. So this is 92nd that comes along here. There is a lot of affordable housing in this area. This particular complex, Overlook, has 160 units. Of those, 400 residents are there and they live below 60% AMI. So we consider that, and HUD considers that, very low income. They need area median income. Area median income, yep. So that's when you go back to that slide where we were showing you is, how many people are in your home, what's your income, and how do you compare to that? And so they've done a comparison of everybody, and that's how they figure out area median income. So when you're at 60% area median income, there's far more subsidies. The Colorado Housing and Finance Authority has a rule that says that if you get the low-income housing tax credits, which is a type of funding for affordable housing, if you use that, you have to keep it at 60% area median income. And what you're seeing in this other line here is that Adams County has contributed $12 million in private activity bonds. So like municipal bonds, these are private activity bonds, they can fund private development with these public funds for the benefit of people who are 60% area median income and below. So this is a huge project with upgrading electrical, plumbing, HVAC, cabinetry, flooring, appliances, windows, replacing roofs. They've got a main water line that needs to be upgraded, and they're resurfacing parking lots. So a $78 million project. And the reason they got 12 million in that private activity bonds, and by the way, that's not money, that's like bonds that you put money into the market. They've got to be, the bonds have to be issued, people have to buy those bonds, and then the money comes back from those bonds and they get put in a low interest loan. And that's what goes to finance that type of construction. 12 million is about 2 years worth of Adams County funds. To get to the 78, they had to get Thornton. So Thornton is given some funds, Westminster's given some funds. So again, you talk about collaborating, because when you need a house over you and a roof over your head, it doesn't matter where you're living as long as it's safe. Yeah, that's one of the things a housing navigator does. So if you're working with a housing navigator, they'll sit and they'll call and they'll say, where are my open units in Adams County? Now, if somebody has kids and their kids are going to a school, they ultimately try to get the kids as close as possible to that school. But there's times that, you have to go somewhere and you have to rely on that. So that, yes, we try to keep people in Adams County. Yep. Sure. I don't know if I can go back. Whoops, I'm not going anywhere. This one is about a year and a half. Yeah. It's multiple buildings there. And one of the things that once you deal with federal funds, there's rules that say if for some reason that you can't get in and out of your property, they have to move you somewhere else. So they may even move somebody across the street. So they'll take the time to do what needs to be done. Preferably, we don't try to move people. I don't know about you, but the thought of moving is not fun. So here's another thing is repurposing property. So this particular affordable housing project is called Caraway, but we all knew it as the Child and Family Services building prior to this being built. So when this was built, we had a building in Adams County that was off of Broadway. It's just north of 100 or I-36, Highway 36 and I-25 and that interchange there. I think Mableton Administrative Offices is right across from that. And so the Maker Housing Partner said to us, we think we can do this if you give us this building. So they took the building, repurposed it. They have teens aging out of foster care in this building. Then they took, and this is the inside of the building. I mean, it's a beautiful building. Then they took the back area, which you're seeing here used to be a parking lot. And they took the parking lot and they built buildings there. So you've got apartment buildings back there that also are for low and moderate income. It's an interesting project because in the end, you got 116 apartments on a property that what would you have done with it? You could have tried to sell it to commercial, but in this case, because Adams County owned it, we were able to say, nope, we want to use it specifically for affordable housing. This was, I want to say there's like 14. So correct. The ones in the building are the ones they have priority because there's certain vouchers that they have for those individuals. The ones in the back, the ones back here are not necessarily reserved specifically. One of the things that when we deal with housing, we have to deal with the Fair Housing Act. And the Fair Housing Act came around right after the Civil Rights Act. And the idea behind civil rights is that we don't, people are treated equally. And one of the things we run into is there's only a few things where we can identify very specific populations for housing, because a lot of people say, well, if you just break it up and you just say, this is for this and this is for that. So children aging out of foster care is one of those special populations. People who are, and you're going to see this coming up, people who are 62 years of age or older can be considered a special population if there's problems with 3 things of daily activities, and then you can do it. But there's a lot of domestic violence victims and survivors. They are considered a special population. But in general, there aren't that many. So they tend to be, when I say these are open in the back, the funding that they used made it so that this is just income qualified. Everything on this is maintained by Maker Housing Partners. They own it, they developed it, they maintain it. They handle all of the intake and of rental payments. So all of that. Problems on the property, we all go to them. It's a good question because sometimes it's split. So you may have recall this building was originally a schoolhouse in 1927. It became a coffee shop in the 60s, and then unfortunately it burned. I believe it was March of 2020. If all goes well, it will now be affordable housing. Maker Housing Partners said, this is a great opportunity to try to renovate, rehabilitate the building so that you can have affordable housing. But one of the nice things about affordable housing when you repurpose is there's also funding that allows you to keep some of the historic elements of a building around, which is nice. Some people love it. And I think there's a little block at the end of this that's still here that talks about the original establishment of the schoolhouse. So that kind of thing would be lovely to keep. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that happens is it's like buying a house. You can only buy so many houses at once. And Maker Housing Partners is in one of those situations where they get their loans based on and their funding based on how much they have leveraged out. How much are they leveraged out? And how much can they handle? And so they typically try to close out a project before they start a new project. So you've seen their name already in here, and you're going to see their name again. And as they're closing out, they receive the funding through Adams County to purchase the property. They still have to get the funding to do the renovations, to do the rehab. So this is the one they're trying to close out. You may have heard of Crossing Point. I've heard you heard a presentation on that before. This is at 104th in Colorado. I probably can answer the most questions on this because I was the person at Thornton behind this project. When they came in, they looked for the land, and there is a lot of partners that made this happen, including when you're dealing with the drainage on the property, there was a whole wetlands for that parking structure that went under for RTD. And so instead, Thornton moved the wetlands to the other side, but that also became a drainage pond for everything on this site as well. So Maker Housing Partners has done this in 2 phases. The first phase is Crossing Point North. This is the inside of the lobby. This is 64 units, and this is the one that I was talking about. This is for people who are 62 and older. So it's considered, I don't know what you want to call it. You can call it senior housing if you want. You can call it, housing for people who are done doing maintenance. That's what I like. So 64 apartments for people there, and they have full apartments, and they have a community garden. They have a lobby area. There's even an office, I think, for Maker Housing Partners on site. So when people have questions, then the south part, the grand opening is this next week. And that is 142 apartments for people who earn between 30% area median income and 70% area median income. It's considered family apartments. So it's probably going to be a lot of families in that building. It backs up behind it to open space. There's a fishing pond back there as well. Right across on the other side, you heard me talk about the parking structure. There is actually the commuter rail stop is right there. So once Maker can close this up, they can start working on moving on to their next project. I don't know what that will be, but Boyer seems to be one that I would think they would want to jump in quickly because they've already got a building there rather than raw land. And they have to be, by the way, that is ARPA funds on the board, Boyer, so they have to be in what we call conceptual site plan by that December 2026. So they've got to start moving forward through the planning process. I don't think we're ever going to catch up. And I say that we as in the United States. I don't think we're ever going to catch up. Part of the reason is because there's people who are buying housing at at a lower amount that they can afford. So I'm one of those people. When I went and was deciding to buy a house, I could get approved for X amount, but I said I don't want X amount, mainly because I don't like cleaning a large house. So I'm going to go for a smaller house. Well, that's a different price point. So everybody, when you have so many people going for those same price points, then you don't have enough housing of that price point. So I think when you run into that, that's just for the owner occupied. For renter, we're going to run into some similar problems because there's when I was looking at this for Adams County, we had so many children coming out of new moms that it was like for every new mom there was like 5 children. And I thought that amount of population growth means we're never going to catch up. We're always going to be trying to build or create programs. So there are some strategies to get there. One of those is allowing accessory dwelling units where you turn a basement, a garage, or something on the outside of your house into an apartment. And that can truly help, especially if you've got people. There's new houses where they'll have it on the front of the house, so you can come into the house and they'll have 2 doors, and the one door is the main house and the other door has this apartment on the front. So developers are starting to look at that as well, which I think is a lovely idea, because you can have people in your family come live with you then, and they're not dealing with that housing cost burden. There was at one year that for every new mom there was 5 kids. I don't know how. I think it was new kids coming in, moving into Adams County, as well as new moms having kids. It was a combination of both. And they were saying the amount, and they were averaging the amount of kids coming in between 1 year and the next into Adams County. So yes, both migration and new moms. This was before the pandemic. Lord knows what the pandemic did. So people put in their application, and it literally goes through, are you income qualified? And that's for the 142. For the people that were here, it was, are you income qualified? Are you age qualified? And then it was first come, first serve. So I always tell people, if you're interested in one of these apartments, you have to get your application ready to go. It's kind of, they go right to the owner operator. So in this case, it was Maker Housing. So Maker opened up what they call their wait list, but really it's their applications. They did that in May, and I think they were done. They had gone through, they had collected enough in the first day that they could fill all apartments, and they had lots. Mm-hmm. Yep. You're absolutely right. There's people moving all around. And the same thing happened when we were watching it from emergency rental assistance program. If people could, in the program, if you had lost your home or just about to lose your home, and you could find something else, and you could attach that. You could use some of your rental assistance for a security deposit in the next few months rent to get you up and stabilized. So there's a lot of people saying, now's the time, I'm moving. And I know that we got people from Denver, Aurora, some from Jefferson County. Yeah, I think it's when you do affordable housing, everything is a subsidy. So when they do the subsidy, it's you have to get those grants and those loans and the bonds and everything to make that happen. But also you need some form of subsidy. I mean, 30% area median income. Somebody better have a housing choice voucher. That basically is the only way they're going to be able to get in there. So sometimes the developers, and you'll see like housing authorities do it, they can get access to more vouchers than others. But Community Reach has vouchers. Shiloh House, that deals with the kids aging out of foster care, they have vouchers. So there are vouchers that can be used anywhere. But that's the problem. You cannot build housing for people at this and break even. So if you're a developer, it's not making money. It's literally, I'm going to be donating a good chunk of my funds to get that affordable housing up. Yeah, it's what we used to call Section 8. They're now called housing choice vouchers. Yeah. And they can either, and housing choice vouchers can be truly like a voucher, like a coupon, or they can be attached to a unit. So new construction. The next three projects you're going to see are in Commerce City. A lot of funds that we have put towards these projects. This is a private developer, and he has been struggling because he got the land. He's been working on this for 2 years and went back to the state, and the state said, there's so much competition, we're not giving you as much as you asked for. So he keeps continuing to come back, but look at what he's trying to do. He's trying to get at 60% area median income, and he's trying to serve larger families. It costs more to build a 3-bedroom unit than it does a studio or a 1-bedroom. So one of the things, in answer to your question about how do private developers do it, most of them try to just go for studio and 1-bedroom. But to try, this person is truly acting with his heart and wanting to build the affordable housing and build the affordable housing for the families that are living in that area and need that space. And so this is one of those ones that, again, has been in the financing part for a while. Another new construction, which just got approved through Commerce City, is South Platte Crossing. You can see the concept drawings up here. This is the old Adams County building. This is going out here in this parking lot right here. So it's only going to have 60 units. It's a small, because obviously it's going in the parking lot. But it's going through Urban Land Conservancy. So they are a particular group that brings in other developers to make this happen. And they will have studio to 3-bedroom, and they also have funding. They have a great reputation. We have given them a home loan, but there's ULC has come in with some other funding for them. And you can see they're going between 30 and 80% area median income. That construction should start in another few months, and that you should see that at the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. And this Tiny Home Village, Access Housing, is really stretching themselves. They typically just work with programs where they've got some apartments that they have on site, just a few, and then they provide a lot of rental assistance programs. On the side, and you can see this is their existing housing. So they have an old kind of a hotel apartment complex, doesn't have a lot. Their office is there off to the side, and then they've purchased this land next to them. And they're working with the Adams 12 School District, their career and technical education program, and the students are building tiny homes. So you take a class You build the homes and they deliver a home every year to Access Housing. Because it happens that way, Access Housing, each home has to have its own water, sewer, and electrical access. So it's a slow process, but at the end of it, they should have some tiny homes. And the idea behind this is they're trying to reach the young adults under age 24, whether or not they're aging out of foster care. But they're trying to reach that because a lot of the people that they serve in their current existing housing is usually single moms with children. And that is the end. But there, like I said, there's lots of programs that we do as well. So do you have any questions? Yes. How many are on wait lists? It really depends. What I hear is the average is about 300, but I also hear that people are on multiple wait lists. So you can get on a wait list for one. Remember, there's 100 different affordable housing complexes that range anywhere from like 8 units all the way up to 200 units. So you can go on a wait list for each one of those units. And then when you get off that wait list, you know, you're moving in, you're not thinking about getting yourself off. So I would guess when it comes down to it, it's probably half that are legitimately have a possibility of getting in. Kind of. No, they're right on Access Housing property. Yep. It's actually, let's see if I can do that. So let's go here. They are, believe it or not, down here. So like I said, we have all of this happening here with the South Platte Crossing and the 7001, but they're down here as well. They're down in this area. I think it's off of 70. So it. So they're over here in Commerce City. Yeah. So 224 is here. Let me see if I can get the other one. Yeah, so they have a bathroom, so a separate bathroom, and it's used by everybody in there. And then a common kitchen, living room, and then they have a bed area. That's it. So you're talking like 400 square feet. No, you usually have it sectioned off so you have a bedroom that's separate. Like you could have it as a loft above your kitchen. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yep. What usually happens is you walk in and your kitchen is right there, and your when I call it living area is there. Sometimes your table pops out and it pops down and underneath, and you have a couch and that kind of thing. So you can move that around. But you usually have a one room that's closed off for your bathroom and one room that's somehow isolated or closed off for your bedroom. It's like exactly. That's exactly it. Yep. Yep. Which if you don't have a lot of stuff, that's fine. Or if you want to get rid of a lot of stuff. Yes. That's an interesting question. We don't necessarily partner with them. Probably the time I think about partnering is when we went through the foreclosure crisis, and they ended up assuming the loans and mortgages on all those homes that were foreclosed. We spent a lot of time working back and forth with those banks because they wanted it off. They didn't want, a property that was vacant and could be vandalized on their books. So what they really tried to do was get into the programs that we were working with, which was to get federal funds and do renovations and then selling them to low to moderate income homeowners, usually first time home owners. That's when we would partner more with them when I was on the phone. Usually they are financing the back end. So they're working directly with the developer and they are the primary. So in terms of like Crossing Point, they actually created a whole project that was underwritten by Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo was the one that was checking all the grants and the loans and making sure that everything added up and made sense. So they truly do become the financial experts and they do become a partner per se, but almost a really high level partner. So I don't tend to talk to them as much, but I know they're on the back end. Yes. No more questions. Well, good. Yeah, because it's a private developer, and there's so much competition right now. I mean, we have a lot. This is a lot of projects going on, and I will say every single county has a lot of projects. Thank goodness for the ARPA funds, but there's other funds that we used as well to try to. The Prop 123 funds are going to be coming in as well, so all of those funds are really important. But the competition is still there for the funding, which is why they're struggling, because it usually takes 7 different funding sources to build a new affordable housing, sometimes even preservation, but definitely to build. So you are going through loans and bonds and grants and grants and grants and underwriting. So it's not easy. And anyone falling through, like I said, he was expecting something from the state. The state had tentatively said, we think we're going to give it to you, and then turned around and said, we can't give you that whole thing. So we've been on our end saying, we don't want to give this up. It's too important. So we've been trying to rack our brain and figure out what else can we do. Um, No, in fact, that project will go next week to the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll ask them if they're okay with giving some ARPA funds that are considered what we consider filling the gap funds. And part of his problem is the loan rates. We ran into that. Maker ran into that with Crossing Point. They were not expecting the 7.49 loan rates on some of these things. So when they started to, right as you're either starting construction or ending construction, you run into these loans coming due. So that's creating a major problem. Yeah, I was going to say it doesn't necessarily ARPA, but it'll usually say funding through Adams County or City of Thornton or State of Colorado. So there you will know that, but they don't. Correct. Sure. I will take that. I will definitely take that back. Judy's saying, let's move on.